The moment my daughter-in-law Patricia looked me straight in the eye across that kitchen counter and said, "Face it, Curtis, you can't survive a week without us," something inside me that had been quiet for way too long finally snapped. But I didn't yell, I didn't argue. I just set down my coffee mug, pulled out my house keys, and placed them right there on the granite countertop she was so proud of. My son Bradley stood behind her, staring at his boots like they were the most interesting things in the world, pretending he couldn't see what was happening to his old man. "Where exactly do you think you're going?" Patricia asked, that smug little smile playing on her lips. I walked to the door without looking back. "We'll see who needs who," I said. "My name is Curtis Phillips. I'm 67 years old, and I spent 40 years swinging hammers and running construction crews all over Ohio. Built this house with my own two hands back in 1987, right after I married Dorothy. She passed 3 years ago, and that's when everything started falling apart. The trouble began about 6 months after Dorothy's funeral. I'd been rattling around in our old house like a marble in a coffee can, and Bradley suggested I move in with him and Patricia temporarily while I figured things out. Patricia seemed nice enough at first, always asking how I was doing, making sure I had everything I needed. She'd bring me coffee in the morning and ask about my day. Looking back, I realized she was studying me like a contractor studies a blueprint, figuring out all the weak spots. Somewhere along the way, being helpful turned into being controlling, and being controlling turned into something a whole lot uglier. Little comments here and there about how I did things, suggestions about updating my routine, always phrased so sweetly that if you called her on it, you'd look like the unreasonable one. That morning started like any other. I was up at 5:30, making coffee and starting breakfast the way I'd done every day for the past year and a half since moving in. Patricia came downstairs around 7, already dressed for her job at the marketing firm, scrolling through her phone like she always did. "Coffee's ready," I told her. The same thing I said every morning. She didn't even look up from that screen. "It's too strong again." "I've told you 3 times how I like it." I'd been making coffee for 45 years, perfected the blend when Dorothy was pregnant with Bradley, and couldn't handle anything too bitter, but I didn't say anything. You learn to pick your battles when you're sharing someone else's space, even when it's your son's space. Bradley came down a few minutes later, grabbing his work clothes and his lunch bucket. He's a foreman now at Morrison Construction, good steady job, makes decent money, nothing wrong with honest work. The boy learned his trade from me, though he probably doesn't remember those Saturday mornings when I'd take him to job sites and let him carry my tool belt. "Morning, Dad," he said, giving me that quick nod he'd been giving me since he was 16 and too cool to hug his old man. Patricia finally put her phone down and looked at both of us like we were interrupting her important business. "Bradley, we need to talk about your father." Here we go, I thought. Another one of her family meetings where she did all the talking and we did all the listening. "Curtis," she said, using that tone like she was addressing a child who'd tracked mud through the house, "you've been here 18 months now. We've been patient, but frankly, it's not working anymore." I set my coffee down carefully on the kitchen island I'd helped Bradley install the previous summer. "What's not working? You take up space. You're always underfoot. The house feels crowded with you here. And honestly," she paused for effect the way people do when they want to make sure their knife hits deep. "You don't contribute anything meaningful." The words hit like a sledgehammer to the gut, but I kept my face neutral. 40 years of dealing with difficult contractors and picky customers teaches you how to keep your mouth shut when someone's trying to get a rise out of you. I'd learned that lesson early, working for old Jake Morrison back in the day. He used to say, "Never let them see you sweat, Curtis. Once they smell weakness, they'll tear you apart. If you're not happy with the arrangement," I said carefully, "maybe I should look into other options." That's when she laughed, this sharp, dismissive sound that echoed off the kitchen walls I'd helped hang the drywall for myself. The same walls where Dorothy's recipes were still taped inside the cabinet doors, where Bradley's childhood height marks were still penciled on the doorframe to the pantry. "Go ahead, Curtis. Face it, you can't survive a week without us. You're 67 years old, you've got nobody else, and frankly, we're the only ones willing to put up with your little habits and your constant need for attention." I looked at Bradley, waiting for him to say something. Anything. To remember that I'd taught him how to drive stick shift in the driveway outside this kitchen window. To remember the nights I'd stayed up with him when he had pneumonia at age 8, holding cool washcloths to his forehead while Dorothy slept. To remember that I'd given him the down payment for this house as a wedding gift 5 years ago. But he just stood there, staring at those damn boots, and I realized he'd made his choice a long time ago. His silence hurt worse than Patricia's words. At least she was being honest about her contempt, so I put my keys on the counter and walked out. I drove around for about 3 hours, not really going anywhere, just letting my hands work the steering wheel while my mind processed what had just happened. The radio was playing some country song about going home, but I wasn't really listening. I kept thinking about Patricia's words, the way she'd said them like she was stating a simple fact. "You can't survive a week without us." Maybe she was right. Maybe I was just a stubborn old fool who didn't know when to accept reality. I had Social Security coming in, sure, but was that enough to live on? The house Dorothy and I had shared was sitting empty, but it needed work. The gutters were probably full of leaves by now, and I knew the furnace filter hadn't been changed since before I moved out. Eventually, I found myself parked outside that house, the one I'd built with my own hands back in 1987. Dorothy had picked out the lot, said she liked the way the morning sun would hit the kitchen window. I'd drawn up the plans myself, got the permits, poured the foundation with a crew from Morrison Construction. It took us 8 months to finish it, working weekends and evenings after my regular job. The grass was getting long, maybe 6 inches high in some spots. The gutters were indeed full of leaves, and I could see a couple of loose shingles on the north side where the wind had gotten to them. But the bones of the place were solid. I'd built it to last with good lumber and proper footings. Houses I'd built 30 years ago were still standing strong all over the county. I sat there for the longest time before I finally got out and unlocked the front door. The smell hit me first. That particular combination of closed-up air and the cedar sachets Dorothy used to keep in the linen closets. Everything was exactly like we'd left it when I'd moved in with Bradley and Patricia. Dorothy's reading chair by the window still angled toward the morning light. The kitchen table where we'd eaten thousands of meals together, played cards with Bradley when he was young, gone over construction blueprints when I was bidding jobs. The silence was different from the uncomfortable quiet at Bradley's house. This was peaceful silence, the kind that comes from a place where you belong. I walked through the room slowly, running my fingers along surfaces I'd sanded and painted myself, the banister I'd turned on my lathe in the workshop, the built-in bookcases in the living room where Dorothy kept her romance novels organized by author. I ended up in our old bedroom, standing in front of the closet where Dorothy's clothes still hung. Her winter coats were pushed to the back, and behind them I could see the edge of the fireproof safe we'd bought from Sears back in 1995. It took me a minute to remember the combination -04 15 to 62, our anniversary date. Dorothy always said important things should be easy to remember. Inside, underneath the insurance papers and the original deed to this house, I found an envelope with my name on it in Dorothy's careful handwriting. The paper was cream-colored, the good stationery she saved for thank you notes and sympathy cards. I carried it to the kitchen and sat down at that familiar oak table before opening it. The first words made my chest tight. My dearest Curtis, if you're reading this, what I was afraid would happen has happened. I had to stop and pour myself a drink from the bottle of bourbon Bradley had given me last Christmas, still sitting in the cabinet where I'd left it. Dorothy's voice seemed to speak right off the page, clear as if she was sitting across from me. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you while I was alive, but you would have confronted Patricia directly, and that would have ruined everything. You've always been too honest for your own good. It's why I fell in love with you, and it's why I had to protect you in secret. My hands started shaking as I read the next paragraph. I've been watching Patricia since she started dating Bradley. Something about her never felt right to me. The way she asked questions about our finances during Sunday dinners, the way she looked at you sometimes when she thought no one was watching, not with love or even mild affection, Curtis, but like she was calculating something. I set the letter down and walked to the window, looking out at the backyard where Dorothy had planted her tomato garden every year. The raised beds were overgrown with weeds now, but I could still see the neat rows where she'd grown enough vegetables to feed half the neighborhood. When I came back to the table, the next paragraph made my blood run cold. I hired a private investigator. It cost $3,500, but I paid it from my bookkeeping account without telling you. Her real name isn't Patricia Morrison, it's Barbara Shaw. 6 years ago in Arizona, she convinced an elderly man named Harold Peterson to change his will and name her as beneficiary. He was 78, a retired accountant with no children. She met him at a senior center where she was volunteering. Sound familiar? I had to read that part twice before it sank in. Patricia Barbara, whatever her real name was, she'd done this before. She'd practiced on some poor old man in Arizona, learned what worked, refined her approach. Harold Peterson. I wondered if he'd sat in his kitchen one morning, being told he couldn't survive without his new friend, the same way I'd been told. The letter continued. Harold died 8 months after changing his will. His distant relatives tried to contest it, claiming undue influence, but they couldn't prove anything in court. Barbara collected $95,000, changed her name to Patricia, and moved to Ohio. 2 years later, she met our Bradley at that coffee shop on Main Street. It wasn't a coincidence, Curtis. She'd researched eligible men in the area, found out about our family, our assets. She selected Bradley the way a hunter selects prey. I felt sick. My son hadn't fallen in love. He'd been hunted, stalked, trapped by a woman who saw dollar signs when she looked at our family, and I'd walked right into it, moving in with them after Dorothy died, making myself the perfect victim. But Dorothy hadn't just discovered the truth. She'd prepared for it. I've been working with an attorney named Beverly Morrison for the past year. Dorothy's letter continued. She specializes in elder law and has seen cases like this before. Together, we've set up legal protections that Patricia cannot touch, no matter what she tries. I had to read that sentence 3 times. My Dorothy, who'd never so much as gotten a speeding ticket, had been building legal fortresses while fighting cancer. While I'd been focused on doctor appointments and treatment schedules, she'd been preparing for a war I didn't even know was coming. The house, the bank accounts, even my life insurance, everything is structured through a living trust that keeps you in sole control. Patricia has no legal claim to any of it. The clause about Bradley and Patricia being guests rather than tenants means you can remove them with 30 days written notice if necessary. I found the trust documents in the safe, pages and pages of legal language that basically said Patricia could take a long walk off a short pier when it came to my assets. Beverly Morrison's letterhead was at the top with a phone number I'd never seen before. But Dorothy hadn't stopped at legal protection. She'd gathered evidence. I bought one of those little digital recorders from Radio Shack, the letter explained. Ohio law says I can record any conversation I'm part of without telling the other person. I've been saving everything Patricia said to me over the past 18 months, especially after she started pushing about adding Bradley's name to the deed. I found the recorder in a small plastic bag, along with a USB drive labeled evidence in Dorothy's neat handwriting. My old laptop was still in the bedroom, hadn't been turned on since before she died. It took a few minutes to boot up, but when I plugged in that drive, there were dozens of audio files organized by date. I clicked on the first one, dated about 18 months before Dorothy passed. The sound quality was surprisingly good. I heard Dorothy's voice offering coffee, then footsteps and chair legs scraping across the kitchen floor. "It would be so much easier if Curtis's name was on the deed with you," came Patricia's voice, sweet as honey for tax purposes. "You understand. And if something happened to either of you, the transition would be smoother for Bradley and me." "Nothing's going to happen to us," Dorothy replied, her tone pleasant but careful. I knew that voice. It was the one she used with door-to-door salesmen and telemarketers. "Well, you're both getting older. And Curtis forgets things sometimes, doesn't he? I've noticed him getting confused about names and dates. It might be early dementia." I nearly threw the laptop across the room. I'd never had problems with my memory. Patricia had been planting seeds, trying to make Dorothy think I was losing my mind so she could justify taking control of our finances. There was a pause before Dorothy spoke again. "Curtis's memory is fine, Patricia. But thank you for your concern." The second recording was from 6 months later, and Patricia's tone had changed. The sweet act was slipping. "You won't live forever, Dorothy. When you're gone, Curtis will need someone to take care of him, someone to make decisions for him when he can't anymore. Curtis can make his own decisions," Dorothy said firmly. "For now," Patricia replied, and there was something cold in her voice that made my skin crawl. "But these things change quickly. I've seen it happen. One day they're fine, the next day they're confused and vulnerable. It's better if family handles these transitions smoothly." By the third recording, made just 2 months before Dorothy died, Patricia wasn't even trying to hide what she was anymore. "I know you don't like me," she said bluntly, "but I'm not going anywhere. When you're gone, I'll be the one taking care of Curtis. I'll be the one making the important decisions about this family. You can make that easy, or you can make it difficult, but the outcome will be the same." Dorothy's response sent chills down my spine. "I know exactly what you are, Patricia, and I've prepared for you." The recording ended abruptly. I sat there in my kitchen, listening to my dead wife's voice defending me from a woman who'd been planning my exploitation for years. Dorothy had been fighting this battle alone while cancer was eating her alive, and I'd never known. There was more in her letter, details about the trust structure, contact information for Beverly Morrison, and something else that made my heart stop. "There's one more thing, Curtis. In your workshop, behind the pegboard where you keep the hand tools, there's a loose panel. I've hidden something there for your independence. Don't look until you really need it, but when you do, you'll understand." I went down to the workshop, a converted corner of the basement where I'd built cabinets and fixed neighborhood furniture for 30 years. The pegboard was exactly where it had always been, holding my hammers and screwdrivers in neat rows. I'd hung that board myself, knew every inch of it. Behind the pegboard, tucked into the space between 2 wall studs, I found another envelope. Inside were bank statements I'd never seen before, an account Dorothy had opened in my name 5 years ago at a different bank across town. She'd been putting away $200 a month from her part-time bookkeeping job. Money I'd never missed because she handled all our finances. The current balance was $47,200. For your independence, she'd written on a note paper clip to the statements, so you'll never have to depend on anyone who doesn't deserve you. I sat there in my workshop, surrounded by half-finished projects and the smell of sawdust, and cried like I hadn't since the day we buried Dorothy. She'd fought this battle alone, building legal walls around me that I didn't even know existed. While I'd been worried about losing her, she'd been worried about losing me to a predator who'd already killed once in Arizona. My phone rang around 6 p.m. "Bradley's number, Dad," he said when I answered. "Patricia's been calling lawyers all afternoon. She thinks you're having some kind of mental health crisis. She wants to have you evaluated for competency. Is that what you think?"
I asked.
There was a long pause. "I don't know what to think anymore, Dad. You just disappeared. Patricia says you've been acting strange lately, forgetting things." "Bradley," I said carefully, "I need you to come over here tomorrow evening, after work. Just you, not Patricia. There are some things your mother left that you need to see." The next morning, I called Beverly Morrison. She answered on the second ring, and when I told her who I was, I could hear the relief in her voice. "Mr. Phillips," she said, "Dorothy told me you'd call eventually. Are you ready? We met that afternoon in her office downtown." Beverly was about Dorothy's age, with silver hair and sharp eyes that had probably seen every kind of family betrayal imaginable. Her office walls were lined with law books and framed photographs of elderly couples smiling with gratitude. "Your wife was one of the most forward-thinking women I've ever met," she told me, spreading documents across her mahogany desk. "Everything she set up is bulletproof. The trust, the recordings, the guest clause in the residency agreement, Patricia can't touch any of it." She showed me the legal framework Dorothy had built. The living trust was ironclad, drafted to withstand any challenge Patricia might mount. More importantly, it included something called a successor trustee clause that would transfer everything to Margaret, my 16-year-old granddaughter, if anything happened to me. "Your wife was very concerned about the possibility of undue influence," Beverly explained. "She wanted to make sure Patricia could never manipulate you into signing anything harmful." "What do we do now?" I asked. Beverly smiled, and there was something predatory in it that reminded me of a hawk spotting a field mouse. "We let Patricia make her next mistake. People like her always do when they feel cornered." I didn't have to wait long. That evening, Bradley showed up at my door looking like he'd aged 5 years since I'd seen him. He knocked instead of using his key, which told me everything about how things stood. "Dad," he said when I let him in, "we need to talk." I poured him coffee and we sat at the kitchen table, where I'd helped him with homework 25 years ago. He couldn't quite meet my eyes. "Patricia's been calling lawyers all day," he said. "She found one willing to petition for a competency hearing. She says you're showing signs of dementia, that leaving yesterday was proof you can't make rational decisions anymore." I pulled out the digital recorder and set it on the table between us. "Listen to this first." I played him the recordings, all of them. I watched my son's face change as he heard his wife's voice, cold and calculating, talking about me like I was already dead. When Patricia's voice said, "When you're gone, I'll be the one making decisions for this family," Bradley put his head in his hands. "Jesus, Dad. How long has she been like this? According to your mother, years. She just hid it better when Dorothy was alive." I showed him the private investigator's report about Harold Peterson in Arizona, the court documents about the $95,000 inheritance. The name changed from Barbara Shaw to Patricia. The pattern was clear and ugly. She was a predator who specialized in targeting vulnerable older men. Bradley read everything twice before he finally looked at me. His eyes were red, and I could see the boy I'd raised struggling with the man he'd become. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. "I want you to choose," I said. "Her or your family, but you can't have both anymore." He left without giving me an answer, but I could see the wheels turning in his head. The next day, Beverly Morrison had prepared the eviction notice, legal, formal, and devastating. 30 days to vacate the premises. I drove over to the house I'd built and handed it to Patricia myself. She was in the kitchen, the same spot where she'd challenged me 3 days earlier. When she read the notice, the color drained from her face like someone had pulled a plug. "This is impossible," she said. "I'm your son's wife. You can't just throw us out, actually." "I can," I said, showing her the trust documents Beverly had prepared. "You're guests, not tenants. You have 30 days. That's when Patricia dropped the act completely. The sweet, concerned daughter-in-law mask fell away, revealing something ugly underneath. "You senile old fool," she snarled. "I'll destroy you. I'll tell everyone you're mentally incompetent. I'll make sure you end up in a nursing home where you belong." "Go ahead," I said calmly. "Tell them about Harold Peterson while you're at it." She went white as a sheet. In all her planning and scheming, she'd never considered that someone might have looked into her past. Beverly Morrison walked in then, carrying a thick folder full of evidence. "Ms. Shaw," she said pleasantly. Or should I say Ms. Barbara Shaw, "we have documentation of your previous activities in Arizona. We also have recordings of your conversations with Dorothy Phillips. Under Ohio law, those recordings are completely admissible in court." Patricia's high-priced lawyer, the one she'd hired to have me declared incompetent, took one look at the evidence and walked out without another word. "Smart man. You have a choice, Beverly continued. Sign these papers relinquishing any claim to the Phillips family assets and leave quietly, or we turn everything over to the police. The fraud charges alone will put you away for 5 to 10 years. Patricia signed without reading the documents. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the pen. Bradley chose me. It took him 2 weeks to work up the courage, but he finally filed for divorce and moved into a small apartment across town. He comes by most evenings after work now, and we're slowly rebuilding what Patricia had torn down between us. Yesterday he brought his tools over and we started fixing the loose gutters together. My granddaughter Margaret visits every weekend. She's 16 now, smart as a whip, and she told me later that she'd known something was wrong with Patricia for months. She looked at you like you were furniture, Grandpa, she said, like you were just something taking up space. Patricia lost everything systematically. Her job fired her when the background check revealed her Arizona conviction. Her friends disappeared when word got around about what she'd tried to do. Within 6 months, she'd moved out of state, probably looking for her next victim. I kept the house Dorothy and I built together. Fixed those gutters, cut that grass, finished the projects in my workshop. Dorothy's been gone 3 years now, but she's still protecting this family, still making sure we're taken care of. Some nights I sit on the front porch and think about Patricia's words that morning, "You can't survive a week without us." Turns out I didn't need her for a single day. But she needed my money, my house, and my son's blind loyalty to survive. When I stopped providing those things, she crumbled. I'm 67 years old, and I've never felt stronger. Respect isn't something you demand from people. It's something you earn through decades of honest work and keeping your word, and no amount of manipulation can fake that kind of foundation. The truth is, some folks mistake kindness for weakness and patience for stupidity. But when you've built your life on solid ground, you don't need to tear others down to prove your worth. You just stop letting them stand on your shoulders.